Hi, my name is Bill Foote, and I'm a trainer for Concept Professional Training. I'm a forensic psychologist. I've been a forensic psychologist since 1979, which means I'm an ancient dinosaur in this business, and actually have been able to watch the field of forensic psychology develop and flourish over the course of my career. It's been a real joy to watch that happen. My areas of expertise and interest are split between criminal cases, primarily competency, and some sanity and sentencing, and in personal injury cases and civil rights cases, looking at evaluations and work with people who are plaintiffs in those kinds of cases. My very first job as a student in graduate school was at State Penitentiary, which was a little bit like being thrown into the sharky waters. Since that time, I did a lot of work in graduate school and rehabilitation psychology as well, which got me onto the part of this business having to do with personal injury cases. Then I did my internship at a maximum security hospital in California at Atascadero State Hospital. Returned and worked for a rehab agency for about 3 years while I completed my dissertation and got my postdoctoral supervisory experience. And then I was very lucky, and one of my graduate school advisors adopted me into his private practice and gave me his overflow cases. And he already had a beginning practice as a forensic psychologist, and I was able to get to work very quickly and had a full practice within a couple of years. I got my diplomate in forensic psychology as early as one could get it. I think I was 4 years postdoctoral. I got 5 years actually. I got it in fall of 1984. I'm down in the two-digit numbers for diplomate numbers among a good group of people. And that experience has been a wonderful experience of being involved with the academy and with the Board of Forensic Psychology. Since I got that in '84, I've served on the board, and in the late '90s and early 2000s, I was the chairman, president of the Board of Forensic Psychology. And so I started out, like a lot of people do, naively, and began doing work with all kinds of forensic cases, but discovered very early on that I didn't want to do work in child custody cases or termination of parental rights, and family cases generally I didn't want anything to do with, and got out of that work within the first year or two after I started, and began to settle down into the two main areas of practice where I've been practicing ever since. During the late 80s and early 90s, I developed a specialization in working with clergy and teacher sex abuse cases. And that actually began with working in psychotherapist sex abuse cases. And that expertise kind of transferred when we got the huge waves of those cases that started in the late 1980s and early 1990s. We had a large number of those in New Mexico, and still do for that matter, in part because of the number of Catholic churches in the state, and a number of very rural communities in which the young people in those communities are very easily victimized by predatory people. And so I did a lot of those cases in the 90s and carried on, continued to do those cases up until 2014 when I realized I was burned out from doing that work and didn't want to do the work anymore. I haven't accepted any more of those cases in the last 3 years or so. So that had been kind of continuing, and I did those cases all over the country. I did cases in many, many states across the country, California, even New York, other places across the country. That led to an experience that to me is kind of, I'm not sure whether it's defining, or at least it's extraordinary, and that was the involvement in a case with 86 men up in Arctic Canada, where I evaluated all 86 men in relation to a teacher sex abuse case up there. That experience of being involved with these 86 men in Arctic Canada, that case settled. And so my work in the litigation was finished, and one of the elements of the settlement was a treatment fund that was set aside so these men could get treatment. And I thought I was done with the case, but I was asked to help the men get into treatment. Well, we discovered that there was no treatment available for them in Canada. There was no place where they could get treatment of being taught in their native language or being taught in a culturally sensitive way or being treated in a culturally sensitive way. And there was no way for them to get people working with them who knew anything about sexual abuse at the same time. They could get one or the other, but not both of them. And so I was asked to put together a treatment program, and I did, with the help of two social workers who had extensive experience in the North, and with the help of a traditional healer who we brought in to work with us as an integral part of the treatment team. And these three provided treatment to these men over a 3-year period in the North. And I supervised, I was a clinical director of the program and flew up north, full 2 days of travel from New Mexico, and was involved in the treatment of those extraordinary men and the extraordinary treatment team over a 3-year, and it was about a 5-year period altogether where I did this work, which I look back on as being kind of an extraordinary, an unusual kind of thing most forensic psychologists never get a chance to do. Of course, in my work in New Mexico, I have, just because I'm in New Mexico, which is a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to practice, I have chances to work with Native people a lot. And so in criminal cases, I probably, a full maybe half or a third of the people I evaluate are Native American people, a lot of Hispanic people. And so working with the three cultures in New Mexico really ends up being an important part of doing forensic work and helping the court understand how these cultural factors can affect a person being involved in criminal behavior, or the person being a victim of something in a tort case as well, because the cultural landscape and the cultural experiences of those people affects both how criminal behavior comes out and how trauma is experienced. And that's been a real richness that comes out of working in New Mexico with these extraordinary populations. I feel like I've been very blessed in terms of having a lot of opportunities that other people don't have, just by virtue of things that have been put before me and where I live. In this workshop, there are several key things that I think are important for people to walk out with. One is the idea of comorbidity, that you rarely see a diagnosis come through by itself, and that just because you diagnose PTSD or depression or something that you can nail down as a diagnostic entity, that doesn't stop your exploration diagnostically. That in most cases, the very fact that you find one diagnosis really means you've got to be looking for another one. The other thing is focus on functionality, and that is that after all this work and thinking about diagnosis, I think we have to kind of throw it out and ask ourselves the question of how is this experience or series of experiences in the context of this person's life, their prior history, the nature of the trauma that they went through, their own experiences since the trauma, how has that affected their ability right now to function on a day-to-day basis? In other words, are they able to go to work? Are they able to function with their family? Are they able to enjoy themselves? What is their day-to-day life, and how has that changed as a result of these experiences? And that emphasis on functionality takes you away from a lot of traps. You can get caught in a diagnostic trap. Well, if this isn't PTSD, then we have nothing. Well, no. You can have a lot of other things that affect functionality that aren't necessarily even diagnostic entities, but combinations of symptoms that significantly interfere with the person's functioning on a day-to-day basis. And it's really the loss of function that the tort system we deal with, and for that matter, the employment discrimination system we deal with, plays out in terms of assessing damages. Damages are really based upon functionality and the loss of function. Putting this together, the complexity of PTSD, it's a deceptive disorder because it looks like a Chinese dinner menu of 1 from column A and 3 from column C and 2 from column D or whatever, and you get the diagnosis that falls out of that, you think, oh, this is just a question of doing this. When really, it's a very complex disorder, and that depending on a whole bunch of factors in terms of the person's pre-existing condition, what happens during the trauma, what happens after the trauma, things that make the condition worse, things that make the condition better, which cluster of symptoms the person has and how those fall out, it makes it a very, very complex disorder. And the research has told us that it's even more complex than we thought it was to start with. And has kind of started to flesh, and what the emerging research that comes out of our unfortunate experiences in Afghanistan and in Iraq, that with all the PTSD victims that we have coming from those war sites, we're learning a lot more about it. And almost every day there's something new that comes out of the literature that just kind of changes how we look at stuff and changes how we think about the disorder itself. And that's exciting to me. I think it's something that we really don't have the handle on it we're going to have in 10 years. And if you look at where we stand now compared to where we stood even 10 years ago with this disorder, if I look back at my notes from a workshop I gave, a similar workshop I gave 10 years ago, we know so much more about it now than we did then. Oh, I like to do several things. I sing. I'm a tenor, and I sing with a men's a cappella group in Albuquerque, and we perform 2 or 3 major concerts a year. They have a mixture of folk and classical music. I also play guitar and mandolin and sing folk music with a group. We jam every week, and I go to a summer camp in North Carolina where I sing and drink beer and play music for a week, which is just heaven. I also enjoy fly fishing, and I enjoy hiking and getting around. I enjoy walking my 2 Labrador retrievers. And my life in Albuquerque and with my wife and my kids is very rich. So I have a very rich and full life.